It's the spooky month, so let's take a look at the Halloweeny Scooby-Doo movie, Scooby-Doo and the Goblin King, released in 2008. Written and directed by Joe Shida, who had previously worked on a number of direct-to-DVD films and created What's New Scooby-Doo. The film is generally joyful. It harkens back to the 80s trilogy of the Boo Brothers, Reluctant Werewolf, and the Ghoul School, focusing on Shaggy and Scooby going on their own supernatural adventure. It has a lot of fun with the setting of a monster town, with references to various disguises used throughout the franchise, and a few even more esoteric. It's also one of the most competent portrayals of the characters, with the two taking charge and finding their own courage. It's definitely a more silly film than the Real Monsters trilogy, or some of the more recent Halloweeny attempts, which I've reviewed before, but in many ways that's a strength. The tone is set very early on, with cartoony physics and the disruption of a magic show, the magician being played by Newman. In general, the voice cast is stellar, with Wallace Shawn as a helpful curator and Tim Curry as the eponymous Goblin King. They're really giving it their all with their performances too, hamming it up with the best of them. As long as you sit down and enjoy the ride, it's a grand old time, but there are a few knocks against it. The first is, weirdly enough, the sound design. Generally, this isn't a cause for concern, or even worth thinking about, but here the cartoon sound effects are particularly abrasive. This is especially true in the first half hour, where they repeat the same eye-opening effect at least half a dozen times, and the others are all the generic sproings you've heard since the original show. Wanting to represent the madcap nature of the film is one thing, but it just feels lazy and repetitive. It does improve as the film goes on, but it makes the opening feel jarring. As stated before, this is heavily a Scooby and Shaggy adventure, but the rest of the gang is also there. They have a singular scene where Velma faints due to the real magic element, and then Fred and Daphne set up a trap that doesn't work. Their role in the film is so little, it would feel better if they weren't there at all, like the old movies. Maybe a scene at the beginning explaining their absence, then focus on the actual story, instead of them wandering around. At the end, they're even made to forget the entire thing happened, further cementing how pointless they were. Also, a brief continuity note, because we all know how important that is. This film takes place in Coolsville, which is also the setting for A Pup Named Scooby-Doo and Trick or Treat, another Halloween film. Now, in that world, typically monsters aren't real, but I guess this is the one exception, with Halloween weakening the barriers between the spirit realm or something. It works best if you don't think about it. The film's credits are quite fun, with the gang traveling on a roller coaster through various spooks and ghouls. The whole time Shaggy and Scooby are surprisingly calm, as it's revealed when they know it's fake, it's all alright. That's kind of their thing for this film, that they are confident and courageous, even when running away. It works, generally speaking. The magician that they disgrace swears revenge on them, and then for some reason a fairy flies into his tent and causes mischief. He manages to swat it and steals its magic power, which gives him general telekinesis, flying, and whatnot. The fairy is voiced by Hayden Panettiere at the peak of her hero's fame, for whatever reason. It's also later revealed that she's the daughter of the Goblin King, which brings up a lot of questions that I'm not sure I want answers to. Moving on, he heads to the nearest magic shop, where Shaggy and Scooby were trick-or-treating. He turns the proprietor into a rabbit, which becomes an Alice in Wonderland reference, and then they're off into a magical world on a weird skeleton train. They even get a magic deck of cards, and have the first of their many transformations. They get a few magical implements throughout the adventure, although this one kind of goes nowhere, just appearing for a few brief gags which feels like a waste. Later they're given a shape change potion, but they used a card for that before. Why give them two separate items? It's a bit of sloppy storytelling, but it's not a huge deal. What is big, however, is the werewolf bouncer they run into, also voiced by Tim Curry. However, in an incredible disguise, Scooby becomes a werewolf inside Shaggy's clothes, another fun reference to the older films. The bar they end up going to is full to the brim with these, showing the love for the franchise, which is key to these nostalgia-filled attempts. There's also a real sense of danger in the next chase scene, where the Headless Horseman comes close to chopping off both Scooby and Shaggy's head, and only the wacky collar gag saves them. Then there's a classic Three Witches scene, inspired by Hocus Pocus and Macbeth and such. After that, they head to a goblin rave disguised as Velma and Daphne, and apparently all the goblins except Tim Curry have the hots for them. It's odd at the best of times, and is quite an extended sequence. At the end they get revealed, however, and the plot progresses. Newman gets his goblin staff and becomes the Goblin King, but for like 5 minutes before he's defeated by a pumpkin bomb by Scooby, who then turns into his own draconic form, which is pretty neat. The film moves at a good pace and really embraces the Halloween nature, with a good variety of spooks, ghouls, and goblins. The comedy works most of the time, and the action scenes are well made, if nothing extraordinary. Unfortunately, the 3 non-Shaggy Scooby characters get left behind, with nothing to do except fill up screen time, but their scenes are only a brief part of the film. All that makes this as a solid B on the tier list, just ahead of Trick or Treat. It's a bit more fun than that film, with a more inventive villain and more stuff happening. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more. Be well.